Quick thank you to Michele Imperiale for the previous presentation. My name is Francis Bell. I am the Head of Enterprise Architecture, Methods and Platforms at Nordea. And today I'm going to talk to you about Nordea's use of EA to assess its IT and applications. If you have any questions, please post them in the conference forum where you can go to make a community to access. And then there, of course, you can interact with other participants and, of course, post more questions to the speakers. And I will try and hang around after this presentation to answer to your questions as well. So a quick note on who we are. Nordea is a full-service universal bank with an operating income of around 8.5 billion euros. Although we're operating in around 19 countries globally, our main home markets are Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. And in terms of size, we're around 30,000 employees. So a quick point to what are we going to talk about today? Well, for us, this is about a journey that we took from 2019, 2020, and I expect into 2021 concerning application management. And I'm going to talk around three broad topics about how we get through these stages. We can call them our milestones of inventory, evaluation, and transformation. And for us, this is a journey about going from an unstructured approach to application management to a structured approach to application management. Before I go there, I think it's useful to point out some key things, some key topics or value propositions that are important to underline. I'm not going to read all the text to you in the next slide where we talk about key benefits, but I would like to point to you the highlights. So, reducing the cost. That is really important for us. And when we talk about cost, we mean cost in terms of maintaining the application data, maintaining applications generally, the documentation of applications and so forth. There is cost in this because it takes resources, it takes time, and there's a lot of repetitive work. In addition to that, when we talk about reducing costs, we want to be able to decommission applications in a more, should we say, structured manner, in a way that we can reuse, in a way that we can identify, in a way that we can communicate and talk to each other and understand based on metrics, based on an assessment technique that we all understand. In addition to that, of course, we want to be able to do dependency mapping. And there's an interesting twist here because I know we've been down this journey of dependency mapping. When we talk about enterprise architecture, we think architects are doing all of it. But actually for us, it's not just about architects going on this journey. It's also about the managers of applications being a key part, a key enabler of this journey. Ultimately, the golden goose, the target of this is to be able to do full-blown application portfolio management. But for any of this to really work, we have to be good at managing the core IT assets, the applications. So, the first part of this inventory journey, what we call application consolidation, consists of two broad themes. And they're both basically around data. And when I say data, I'm not talking about logical application models and so forth. It's not as complex or as rich as that. It's actually quite basic. The first one was about consolidating the basic information model on an application. Bluntly speaking, what data do we want to capture on an application? Who's asking us to capture that data? What does the data mean? And how often should we be updating this data? And who should update the data? All of these questions were not answered before this journey. So it became great to have different tools that could host all of this information, but it became meaningless when we wanted to analyze a year or 2 years afterwards. So the first step, I'll talk to you about that in a moment, and the second step was about, of course, consolidating that long list of applications into things that we could really understand, into what we would call real applications. So let's talk a bit about that first journey. And this is really a key part of this journey. What we call application consolidation of the information model. Here, when we first looked at the applications that we had in our inventory, we actually had them in another tool. We brought them into HopeX. In bringing them into HOPEX, we could see that, okay, we were trying to manage around 160 different data points, or attributes as we might call it, on an application. It was just too much information. Upon examining this information, we could see that a lot of that information was repetitive. It was called different things, but had the same purpose. Something was related to GDPR, something was related to information security, and they were both basically the same kinds of attributes, but labeled differently. And this was already a first huge cost saving for us, because the way that we were collecting data was through different initiatives that were asking the same information, but of course in a different way, and storing the same information in different data sources. So it became an exercise that sort of consumed a lot of resources, and of course it was very, very, very repetitive. So we consolidated this information and built a data model around the application and established a rulebook whereby we could see for each piece of information available on an application today, we knew who was asking for it, what it meant, who was supposed to update it, and how often. And this has been a massive step for us forward. So managing the information model. So I put that target up here on this first slide, and it's got structured January 2020, and that was where we are at the beginning of this year, with a well-structured information model on an application. The next step for us, of course, is looking at this information and understanding, well, we need to be able to make this all reusable. And if I open up the next slide here, where I'm really forcing this idea of reusability is the key. It really is the key. It doesn't matter what kind of tool you buy, what kind of tool you use. And of course, even if you're using HOPEX, you will have great models, by all means, and you'll have fantastic architects coming in, defining models, defining applications, independence, and so forth. But what happens when they leave? What happens when they move on for other initiatives? Do you have architects that are going to be there every day to update this data? Probably not. And that's not the case in Nordea either. So when we look at it, who is really close to the information? It's the application owners. It's those who are responsible for the application data. And we need to make sure that they are updating this data in a centralized system. And of course, that's HOPEX. And of course, we have this website that we generate from HOPEX where we can communicate to everybody else what has been documented on the application, reflected in this information model that we all understand and agree on. And this enables us, of course, from different perspectives, processes and risk and so forth, to also reuse that application, knowing that we can trust that data for other kinds of initiatives too, be they for transformation in terms of business architecture or for compliance in terms of, for example, regulatory or internal controls and so forth. So working with this application consolidation, having this information model, governing this information really well, we can see that we still have a list of what we would call application items or technology items that we understood were probably unevenly matched. We had different levels of granularity in what we call an application. In some cases, we call an application a batch job. In other cases, we call an application maybe HOPEX, a full-blown vendor-provided solution, for example. So we had different levels of granularity, and it was very, very hard for us to really understand, okay, when is an application an application?